1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, ich mache mich noch ein bisschen lauter.
Test.
Gut.
3, 2, 1. Oh, das war auch ein guter Klatsch.
Well done.
Did you get that? I'm so confused.
Also ich verstehe nur Bahnhof.
You only understand train station? It's all Greek to me.
Understanding Train Station. Living between cultures with Josh and Phelan.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back. We're in the old setting.
I was going to say, for those of you who are on YouTube,
Yeah.
or listening on YouTube, you actually see that we are in person together now.
Yeah, back in Cincinnati, because I think last time we posted something in person was in Munich.
Yeah.
And now we're back in Cincinnati because you are visiting for Easter.
Exactly.
Which was yesterday.
Yes. I'm still a little jet lagged, so you
yeah.
guys are going to have to be patient with me today. But yeah, so Easter was yesterday, so I came back for Easter, spent time with some family, and just am here for the week, and then ab nach München.
Back to Munich.
Back to Munich.
Yeah, and so of course we have to use the time to record a few podcast episodes.
Yes.
And we're back in the old setting. We have the mason jars. Well, one mason jar
I was gonna
rocking
say, I don't
again.
have a mason
you don't
jar
have a
right
mason
now.
jar, but I think that's what it was usually like. It was one regular water glass and then one mason jar. For those of you who are totally lost right now and have no clue what I'm talking about, some people complained in the past that, or not complained, but
Just
like
commented.
were wondering in the past why one of us always used a mason jar, so Einmachglas in German, as a water glass. But and people asked if it's like a specific
American thing.
yeah,
or
American thing or a German thing, but no.
I think it's just a young person thing.
Yeah, it's like a hipster kind of thing.
Either hipster or just poor person.
One of the two. One of the two.
when you don't have any other real... I feel like it's typical for like college houses
Yeah.
or like Viggies that you just kind of have a mishmash of glasses and you just drink out of whatever you can.
Yeah, but these that we have here, actually, those are like bought jars that
you can buy them as glasses.
Yeah, and you even buy them like with a lid, with a straw as like a to-go cup. So these are made for drinking.
Yeah.
We didn't make that up. But anyway.
Not the topic of the day.
Nope, not really. So yeah, what is the topic of the day?
So I was going to try to come up with some witty transition, but it's not going to work. So the topic of the day is German culture in the U.S., or kind of like fake German culture, or our experiences with quote-unquote German things in the U.S. And are they authentic? Are they not? And how do they differ?
Yeah, things like, pretzels or Oktoberfest or
like Tracht, like just like lederhosen and just kind of the stereotypical images that Americans have of Germans, and are they true or not, and how how for us it's really funny, I think, to see a lot of those things. For me, especially growing up, like that was from like German for me.
Yeah, right. So you
And then
thought
the
it was
flip side,
authentic. Yeah.
And then the flip side, like, oh wait, that's not authentic at all. Or some things are pretty close.
Yeah, and then for me, it's like I come here and people think, oh my God, you must love this place or this festival or this food. And I'm just like, are they serious? Because sometimes I really didn't know if they actually thought that this is super authentic and this really makes me feel like home, or if they were joking. And so like in most cases, no, unfortunately, it doesn't make me feel like home fully. I mean, it's in a lot of cases, it's kind of a, how do you say, like a little taste of home in a very exaggerated way.
And I don't know how it's been for you, Feli, but sometimes when I experience like American things in Germany or German things in the US, it makes me miss the other country more because they're like close but not quite there.
Wait, so if you see something American, quote unquote American, in Germany, it makes you miss America?
Yeah, like
okay.
Real hot dogs. Like, for example, like, okay, we're close, but we're not quite there. Like, let me go back to the US and get a hot dog real quick.
So you'd rather avoid those things in general then, or?
I think it depends.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I try to avoid it, but I definitely notice after experience something that's supposed to be like the same thing or close, I definitely notice like, oh man, I really miss the real thing more. It doesn't mean that I try to avoid it, but I think the sensation of missing the other culture, the other food, for example, is a little stronger in those situations. But I think one thing that's cool is like having grown up, you in Germany and me in the US, with relatively little contact with the other country. Learning a language really opens up the door into learning what the real culture is.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
not just the cultural, the perception that your culture has of another culture.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a good transition into our sponsor for this month, Lingoda.
Yeah, thanks again to Lingoda for sponsoring our podcast in the next few weeks. For all of you who are trying to improve your German skills or English skills or other language skills like in Spanish or French, they also offer business English if you're a little bit more advanced or need English specifically for the job. Lingoda is a great way to learn the language. It's an online language school. They're actually based in Germany, in Berlin, so they have the German stamp of quality, but they still have very affordable prices. And I mean, this is just amazing because you can do it from home and they offer classes 24/7. So you're just very, very flexible with when you take your classes. It doesn't matter which time zone you're in. You can do it in your lunch break. You can do it after work. You can do it on the weekends, whenever you're free.
And I think one big, huge advantage with Lingoda right now, especially during COVID and people working from home, like you said, it is so flexible. So maybe you don't have anything to do at work for a bit, let's hop on a Lingoda course.
Right.
So they're running this really cool promotion right now to really help kickstart your language learning journey. It's called their Sprint. Their Super Sprint, which we talked about in our last episode, is actually sold out now. So that only the Sprint is available. And the way that it works is that you have to attend 15 classes a month for 3 months, and you get 50% cash back of your tuition.
Yeah, and this is a really, really great motivation because if you just invest 3 months, basically, every other day or several times a week, learning a language, speaking a language, listening to the language, and the cool thing is also that all of the teachers at Lingoda are native speakers. This is just very, very efficient when it comes to language learning because we both know this. Immersing yourself in the language is one of the key factors, really. If you just, do it once a week, it's going to take you a lot longer. Not just longer time-wise, but it's going to take you a lot more hours.
Definitely.
Because you're just going to forget things again and you're going to lose track kind of. So this is a really great thing, and they say that after 3 months you're going to be able to have a full conversation even if you're a beginner at the language.
And I totally can believe that as well, especially because the class sizes are so small.
Yeah.
So even though you're not necessarily in the other country and it's hard to get that immersion experience because of the class size being a maximum of 5 students, you really get a lot of personal interaction and chances to speak, which is so essential to when learning a language.
Yeah, and so I attended a class before and the teacher really tried to speak mostly the target language. Of course, every now and then when there is a misunderstanding, they will use English, but it was mostly in the target language, and all the students were very used to speaking German in this case, because I attended a German class, and you could just tell that they were all very professional. I mean, they do this, they offer so many classes every single day. They know what they're doing. So I can definitely recommend Lingoda if you want to learn a language right now, which I've been wanting to kind of improve my language skills for a while.
I was going to say, which language would you be? French?
I've been thinking that for like years, and I've never done it. But yeah.
So the Sprint starts April 28th, and the last chance that you have to sign up is April 16th. So if you're interested, make sure you use our code. It's change112. And sign up for the Sprint. Like I said, the Super Sprint is now sold out, but the Sprint is still available.
Yeah, and because of that, make sure that you're quick so that the Sprint doesn't sell out before you get to sign up. They do have a €49, $59 deposit that you will have to pay, and with that code that Josh just said, change112, you will save €10 or $12 on that deposit. We will put the code and also the link where you can click on and sign up for in the description below, in the video description on YouTube, and also in the episode description on the podcast platforms if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
So make sure to check that out. And now back to the topic.
Back to the topic. So what do we want to start with?
Oh, that's
German
a good
culture
question.
in the U.S.
So maybe some background about Germans in the U.S. So I think most people know that the U.S. is relatively German heavy. There was a huge wave of multiple huge waves of immigration into the U.S. And we're not going to get into the specifics because neither Feli and I are really experts in the history of German Americans.
And we don't have the numbers in front of us right now, so we don't want to tell you anything wrong.
I did look up, though, and there are approximately 44 million Americans with German ancestry in the U.S. as of 2018. And the population of the U.S. is like 330 million. So that's a good portion.
Yeah.
So it's not hard to understand how the German culture may have impacted the American and how there might be some leftovers, if you will, of the German culture and how they've changed in the U.S. over the years of being here.
I actually think it's interesting that you say most people know that there is a heavy German influence in the U.S. because I feel like growing up in Germany as like a kid and teenager, I wasn't really aware of that. I mean, I knew that like some Germans had gone to the US, but to me it was mostly, we never really thought about American history a whole lot. We never really learned about it in school.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of know around what time the United States were founded, and we do know that people immigrated there from Europe, but I think in our minds it's mostly just the British that went there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Which
And
isn't true. It's not true at all.
It's not. I mean, I think the Dutch were here before the British.
Yeah.
But I think also you might be right that might just be some tunnel vision for me, especially because the region of the U.S. that I'm from, Cincinnati, is a very German-heavy city, so we hear about that and we experience it. But yeah, you're definitely right in the fact that I would say most people would think British before German when it comes to culture in the U.S.
But I think it's interesting that in Germany we're not aware of that, because a lot of our ancestors, or I mean not our ancestors in that case, but like people that we used to be related to, immigrated to the U.S., and we don't really, in a lot of cases, don't even know about that part of the family. Like we will know about the part of the family that stayed in Germany, but we don't really talk about that a lot. So that was really interesting for me coming to Cincinnati, because I was like, wow, this is actually really cool that, like, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, Germans from Munich or other places in Germany came here and then brought part of their German culture to the US and then kind of developed it from here and then mixed it with American things, and then
it's like a weird amalgamation, like
it became this
mixture of it all.
Yeah, this new like German American culture.
Yeah. So I mean, everyone knows of hot dogs and hamburgers. I think those are probably. Well, I don't know. Do you think most people think hot dogs are German? Because
I wouldn't say that. I don't think I would think that. In hamburgers, I'm pretty sure that is not I don't think people know for a fact. I don't think that's clear.
Like I said, this is gefährliches Halbwissen, so we don't want to stick it in that.
So it's half knowledge. Because I'm pretty sure that for hamburgers, there's many different theories as to how it was invented, and I think the reason behind the thinking is that hamburger is might come from Hamburg, which is a German city, and a Hamburger is also what you would call a citizen of the city of Hamburg. So I don't think that you can actually say that the hamburger is a German invention. I think the hot dog does have an origin in the Wiener. I don't know.
That's what I would have thought too, but like I said, we don't want to get into the specifics of things that we don't know for sure.
Yeah, well, one thing that we do know for sure is, for example, the Christmas tree.
Yes, the Tannenbaum.
That tradition originated in Germany, 100%, and then it came over to the US, even though the Christmas pickle, which a lot of Americans, especially Americans with German heritage, do, they hide the Christmas pickle, which is like a pickle-sized or pickle-shaped ornament.
Yeah.
We talked about it in the
Christmas
episode.
I was going to say, I think we talked about it.
They hide it in the Christmas tree, and then the first kid to find it in the tree gets an extra present. That is not a tradition that we do in Germany, but the Christmas tree is a German tradition, yes. And we do still mostly use real trees in Germany to this day. Yeah. So what else do we know for sure?
We do know that German was spoken a lot in the Midwest, especially. There was a German triangle in the Midwest of Cincinnati, St. Louis, and Milwaukee, where a lot of German immigrants went, and German was really taught in schools, and there were German language newspapers, and all of that started to kind of change around World War I, when there was more of a hatred towards the actual quote-unquote Germans, because obviously we were enemies, the Americans and the Germans in World War I. So people were not forced, but speaking German was much less common.
No, they were forced. They were even lynched.
Wow.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah, and you know that because of your work in a museum here in the area.
Yeah, I also did one of my projects in my master's program on that topic. But yeah, there were many different areas, probably in St. Louis and in Milwaukee too. But in Cincinnati, for example, there was one specific neighborhood called Over-the-Rhine, which they called Over-the-Rhine because there was a canal, and the German immigrants who settled there just called the canal Rhine, which is a river in Germany. I don't know if it was just because they wanted to feel at home or because they weren't creative enough to come up with a new name for water, but they called it Rhine, and then the neighborhood that was on this side of the Rhine was called Over-the-Rhine. And in that neighborhood, there were other European immigrants there too, but it was mainly a German enclave, so they really spoke German with each other on the streets and the stores. The stores had German signs, the streets had German names. The schools were not only it wasn't just schools that taught German, the schools were in German.
Yeah.
And some of them, not all of them, of course. And then they had like, German societies. They had German culture there in the form of beer gardens and stuff like that. So that was very, very strong. And then there were a lot of breweries.
Yeah.
And they also brought, different societies over there, like Sängerbund, like a singing society, or like the Turners, which is kind of funny because like that's what they were called in the US, but it really just is a gymnastics society that was based on the German Turner, which Turner was their name, but it was also Turner just means a gymnast. Yeah. So it's kind of funny how that became its own like name in the US because they didn't know how to pronounce it. Yeah. The Turners were like pretty influential in the US. Like
That's interesting. I don't know that story very much.
And they started out in Cincinnati, I think. I don't want to say anything wrong. I did the research on that 2 years ago. I didn't look it up again for today. I'm pretty sure they started out in Cincinnati and then basically became a thing in the entire United States. So it was a very big thing, but then two factors played a role. It was definitely World War I, as you said, the anti-German hysteria. It started in 1917 when the U.S. joined World War I.
Yeah.
And then also prohibition, because a lot of the German places were connected to brewing beer and drinking, which, yes, is kind of like a cliche.
That is part of the German culture. That's definitely true.
Yeah, so a lot of those places had to shut down, or they tried to survive somehow by, becoming a speakeasy or something. But most of them, went bankrupt, basically, because they weren't allowed to sell beer anymore. And that was the start of, people... A lot of people changed their last names, their German last names that they were proud of before, but at that point, they either like weren't proud of it anymore because of the association with Germany in World War I, or they were forced to change it because they were actually discriminated and lynched, as I just said. Like some bad things happened there.
I didn't know about the lynchings. Like what I was thinking, like I know there's a street in Over-the-Rhine. I don't remember the German name. I think it was like Schillerstraße or something, and now it's Republic Street. And they changed the name during World War I to make it less German.
Yeah, so they changed, I think, almost all of the street names down there in the Cincinnati neighborhood. I'm sure they did it in other cities too, probably in the U.S. Here in Cincinnati, I think 3 or 4 years ago, they went back to the German street names for some of these streets to kind of preserve the German heritage of the neighborhood, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. You can see like two signs, like the actual street name, which is still, I think, Republic Street, and then you can see the old name on top.
There was an Essenstraße too. That's by Findlay Market.
Okay.
Yeah, what else is there? I think Bremen as well, like mostly like city names.
Yeah, and there are lots. I mean, there are some street names that weren't changed at all. Like there's a Goetta Street.
Right.
It's just funny to drive around and see all of the German names, especially in that neighborhood.
Yeah, so that's definitely an interesting part of history. Of course, there is much more to read about in regards of this, anti-German hysteria and, all the German culture that they brought over at the time. As we said, we don't want to promote any gefährliches Halbwissen.
Dangerous half knowledge.
So let's move on to things that are here today. Do we want to start with like what we have here in Cincinnati, maybe?
Yeah, I think, and this is probably something that obviously is a disclaimer that we should make. We live in Cincinnati, or I'm from Cincinnati, and a lot of this will be Cincinnati specific because that's our experience. A lot of these things you probably won't find in other communities in the U.S. I think in more German areas you'll find a lot of these things, but just because we say this exists in Cincinnati doesn't mean that it's a common thing throughout the U.S.
Yeah.
But I think maybe we should start with some of the smaller things and work our way towards the big one.
Okay, what's a small thing?
A small thing. Maybe Goetta. That's a very Cincinnati thing.
Yes.
So Goetta is a food that's very typical Cincinnati, but a lot of people here think it's typical German.
Yeah.
But essentially it's pork mixed with oats and you fry it. It's like a breakfast food.
But it's like grounded, right?
Yeah, it's ground pork mixed with oats, and you buy it like a sausage pretty much, like in a roll, like an American like sausage. Not you wouldn't buy a German sausage that way. But then you can slice it and you fry it in a pan normally.
Okay, but so it's kind of like a Fleischpflanzer or frikadelle, like consistency-wise, or...
Have you never had it?
No,
true.
No.
Have you ever had it? I know you're a vegetarian.
I've never had it, no. I mean, I've had a Fleischpflanzer before in my life, but...
No, it's not like that.
Not? Okay.
No, it's thinner.
Okay.
It's like a really thin
No,
patty.
I was thinking like the consistency of it, though. It's kind of like...
It's more grainy.
Okay.
Yeah, you can really tell that there's oats in it.
Okay. So basically the story behind this is that this is, I don't know if this is 100% true, but this is what people say, is that German immigrants came to Cincinnati, and especially those who lived in places like Over-the-Rhine, they were poor. They didn't have a lot of money. I mean, they just came to a whole new country. They had to leave everything behind, basically. One of the reasons that they left Germany was the political stuff that was going on during that time, revolution and everything. And they would come to Over-the-Rhine and live in a 2-bedroom apartment with 8 people or more people.
Slum conditions.
Yeah, it was not great, and so they had to make sure that they survived. So whenever they did have meat, they tried to basically stretch it, make it more by adding things like oats to it. And a lot of people, as you said, say that this is really a Cincinnati invention, which I think is true to a certain extent, but apparently there really is a German origin to this, which a lot of people think is not true. But there's this food historian here in Cincinnati, Dan Wellard, and he has researched this, and he told me that there is a town or a region in, I think, Nordrhein-Westfalen or Rheinland-Pfalz, but I think it was Nordrhein-Westfalen, where they had a dish called Grützwurst, which sounds not delicious at all. But apparently that's what it was based on.
Interesting.
Allegedly. But who knows? I mean, maybe it was also just a coincidence that they came up with a very similar recipe. But just trusting his research, there is an actual German origin, but probably only the people from that specific town or wherever it comes from would know about it. It's not like you can go to Germany and ask for Goetta. Nobody will know what that is.
Well, first of all, so I was going to say it's spelled Goetta, which a German would not pronounce as Goetta.
No. We would maybe say Goetta. Yeah. Because like OE could be the replacement for the Ö umlaut.
But yeah, it's a good example of things where, at least in Cincinnati, people see Goetta and they're like, oh, it's German. You know Goetta, right? You're German.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, no, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Or they'll even ask you like, hey, so how authentic is the Goetta? And you're like, it's not a German thing.
So maybe moving on to another example, Stammtisch. So that we actually met at a Stammtisch here in Cincinnati. Stammtisch, I like the word Stammtisch because it comes from Stamm, like a tree, right? Like a trunk of a tree, and a Tisch. I don't know why. It makes sense in German because...
I don't think it comes from that.
Oh, I think of like a Stammkunde.
Yeah, that's what I'm...
But I wonder what does Stamm have to do with it? I guess it supports the business.
I guess so, yeah, probably.
Like a tree,
there's
like
some
a trunk
connection
supports
there.
A tree.
Yeah.
A Stammkunde or a trunk customer.
Yeah, it's just not as literal as you just tried to explain it.
In my brain, it made sense.
It's not like we're sitting at a table made out of trunks or something like that.
Exactly. But yeah, so Stammtisch is a pretty common German thing, I would say that.
Yeah,
maybe in older generations, but I know a couple people in our generation that go to a Stammtisch.
It is a thing. I'm like trying to think whether it's a German thing in general or a more Southern German thing. I'm not 100% sure about that one, actually.
Yeah, so let us know in the comments and send us an email to let us know if you're from other parts of Germany rather than the South, if like a Stammtisch is something
because in Bavaria, that's definitely a thing. And like Stammtisch is definitely more of a abstract word, so it can be used for a meeting that always meets at the same time at the same place, but it can also be used for like that group of people kind of. So there's different meanings to it in a way. It kind of depends on what kind of Stammtisch you go to, because like for some people it's just their regular group of friends and they always meet on Mondays in this one bar, but they might meet somewhere else and then still call it their Stammtisch, if that makes sense. But it might also be something like what we have here in Cincinnati, where it's just a specific time and place, and the people who go there change, though.
Exactly. So, like, for example, the one that we went to in Cincinnati with COVID and everything, it's more difficult, and I don't live here anymore. But it's called Cincideutsch, and they meet to speak German. So they meet every week at the same bar. Normally, there's, like, the same waiter who takes care of the group, and you get to know each other, and you just have, like, this thing in common. So in this case, learning German. And it's a really cool community building thing that I really enjoyed going to.
It's kind of like a regular meeting, if you would want to translate it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a club.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hadn't heard of that concept until I started learning German, like the concept
that's
of a regular's table.
Yeah. And like in a lot of cases, at least in Bavaria, a Stammtisch will have some kind of sign, like a little wooden sign that they put in the middle of the table that like basically marks this as their Stammtisch table, as their Stammtisch-Tisch, their Stammtisch spot, and they will take that thing with them.
Yeah.
As, kind of like a club logo, I guess.
Another thing in Cincinnati, at least, that I think of as far as like Stammtisch is concerned, is there's a thing called the Germania Society here, and they have a mustard club, which is part of the Germania Society.
Oh, is it part of that?
I believe so.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And the mustard club meets once a month to have Weißwurstfrühstück.
Yeah.
Which is like a white sausage
actually
breakfast.
twice a month. I think it's every other Saturday. Yeah, we went a couple times.
Yeah.
That was interesting. That's like also funny because they do bring some of the authentic Bavarian traditions in there. Like they just meet up at this restaurant and they do provide real Weißwürste from Bavaria. And they have Händelmeier Senf. It's actually the Händelmeier Mustard Club.
Yeah.
They were sponsored by that mustard brand. But then like the way that they serve the food is just very different and very unauthentic.
Yeah. I think when we went to, like, they were tiny little mini sausages too.
Oh, really?
At least
I don't even
that's my
remember that.
recollection.
Maybe. But it's just like the way that they serve it, like I think it was definitely paper plates or something, like disposable plates with plastic silverware with, no, we do not do that in Germany, especially not for, sausages. And then they have the mustard in tubes, which is a thing in Germany that we have mustard in tubes. We talked about it in the Jungle Gym vlog that we did on my channel. But it's usually not a thing for the sweet mustard. So the Händelmeier mustard is the sweet mustard, which isn't really a thing in the US. Americans probably don't know what we're talking about. It's like dark brown. And it's
delicious.
It is sweet.
Yeah.
It's very good. But yeah, so
it
those
normally
things
comes
are
in jars.
It usually comes in a jar, and those things are funny. Even for me, like I'm not a person that eats white sausages a lot. I do eat them sometimes. I can eat like half a sausage to a full sausage, which is not a lot. But because the reason I'm vegetarian is that I don't really like meat. But when I'm really hungry, I can kind of suppress my Abneigung, my disgust. I guess my taste preferences, as long as I don't think of where the meat comes from. So I have eaten white sausages before, and I do eat maybe like one sausage once a year or something like that.
Yeah. But like that's another thing that they had at the at this white sausage breakfast was pretzels, right?
Right.
And I think pretzels is another great example.
Yes.
People think, like, you see everywhere in the U.S., like, Bavarian pretzels. And it's really just like a soft pretzel, which I thought, okay, that's a Bavarian pretzel. And then I went to Bavaria, and that's not a pretzel.
It's very different. I mean, pretzels did come to the U.S. through Germany. Like, they were brought over, but then they were like adjusted to American taste preferences, which a lot of the bread taste preferences in the US, I would argue, were heavily influenced by the British people, because the British bread and the American bread is just very, very similar.
Yeah,
like,
I've never had British bread. So
they eat it the same way. Like, it's all squishy and doesn't taste like anything.
Yeah, so that's the thing about the pretzels. They're really squishy.
They're really
here.
soft. They were kind of like adjusted to the taste preferences here. In a lot of cases, they're sold without salt, which I think, like, you know what I mean? Like, in a lot of cases, they're just naked,
Yeah.
if you want to say it like that. Which in Germany, they always come with salt on them.
Yeah.
And then they're usually sold with, in like a mall or an amusement park, they're usually sold with nacho cheese,
Yep, with nacho cheese.
Which,
or if you're like in a German restaurant, they give
quote
you...
unquote.
quote unquote German restaurant, they give you beer cheese.
Which sounds super German, right?
Yeah.
Like
doesn't
beer
exist,
cheese.
though.
Hell yeah.
Doesn't exist in Germany. At least I've never seen it.
Nope. But honestly, I mean, I kind of like it in
It's
some
delicious.
places. They all make it different, I feel like. I don't know if there's like a beer cheese brand that the restaurant's like a supplier. I think they all make it themselves, or like they have a different recipe. Some of these places make a really, really good one, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's not a thing that we do to dip our pretzels in that. I also think that a lot of Americans ask me if we dip pretzels in mustard. Which I always say that, like, not really.
Yeah.
Not in regular mustard at all. If anything, if we eat it together with a Weißwurst.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And you have leftover mustard, you might use your pretzel to soak up the mustard.
But if you just get a pretzel, you're not going to get a dip of mustard with it. No.
No. You'll get a pretzel in and of itself, or like a butter pretzel where
Right.
they'll slice it in like lengthwise and put butter on it, and then
Yes.
you eat it like a sandwich.
Exactly. Or with butter and chives, or with gratinated cheese on top. Those are really like the 4 different versions, like plain, butter and chives, or cheese. I would say
Yeah.
that's really all you can get in Bavaria, at least in Germany. In the US, however, they like to make really funny pretzels where they
yeah.
bake all kinds of stuff in there. Like, I don't know, dried tomato, basil, but it's not on top of it. It's baked into the dough.
Yeah.
Or what else? They have, I mean, a lot of sweet pretzels, like cinnamon pretzels.
Yeah, there's a restaurant, or not a restaurant. Yeah, I guess it's a restaurant. There's like a chain in most malls. It's called Annie Ann's Pretzels. They're okay.
You were like, I don't even know what to say about this.
I think growing up I loved them, and then I became Germanized. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is just a little much.
Yeah, the funny thing is I do like American-style pretzels sometimes. It's just not the same. Like, you just need to expect something else. They also have a different color usually, and I think this has 2 different reasons. I think one of the reasons is that the cover, like what they put on top of the pretzel before they bake it, is different. In Germany,
I think it's called a baste. Yeah.
in Germany they put baste.
I think that's what it's called.
Okay. In Germany, they put lye on it,
yeah.
Lauge, which, from what I've heard, isn't really allowed in the US, or it's not
Okay.
common, one of the 2,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's actually allowed. So they put something else on there in the US, and I think this is also one of the reasons why the pretzels are a lot lighter. Like,
That
the
would make
color
sense.
is more of a light brown/orangey almost,
Yeah.
whereas in Germany, they're usually a lot darker. And then also, they're probably baked longer in
Yeah.
Germany. So that's pretzels for you guys.
Yep. I feel like this episode is pretty Cincinnati specific, but it makes sense because there are so many things that are in both that are supposed to be German, but in Cincinnati. Another thing, like, I thought was super random, and growing up here I didn't know existed, but there's a church in downtown Cincinnati that has a mass in German every week.
That's actually a really cool thing, because that is something that is trying to keep the real German community alive. Because like for those things like Stammtisch, there's usually, actual Germans, and I'm not saying that in a way where I just mean, people whose families are German, people who
Yeah.
learned German from their grandma and parents.
Yeah.
But there's also usually a lot of people who are just trying to learn the language. But at the church service, I feel like there's mostly, real Germans, because they decide to go to a German mass
Yeah.
where the German is very challenging because it's like Bible German.
Yeah.
And also like it's people who are Catholic, I guess. I'm assuming there's also people there who only go there for the community, because I went there before.
Yeah.
Well, you went there with me. And I don't even think that all of these people there were very religious.
But they go for the German community aspect
Yeah.
of it.
But that
So,
was
yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, that's like one of those weird things, like I said, that I didn't know growing up in Cincinnati,
Yeah.
but when I found that out, I was like, that's so random, but cool.
Yeah, they do it every weekend. There were actually a lot of people there. If you consider that the whole thing is in German and it's Catholic too. Like,
Yeah.
how many Catholics do you even find anymore in Cincinnati? It's not the most
At least
common.
not, especially not downtown. I would say, like, out in the suburbs, I know a lot more Catholics, but like that's the thing, is the church is in downtown city. It's in the heart of that over-the-Rhine neighborhood.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a random, funny, cool thing that Cincinnati has.
But there's definitely things that Cincinnati has that other places have too. I mean, the pretzels are definitely nationwide.
Yeah.
And so are things like Oktoberfest,
Yes.
which, yes, Cincinnati does have a Oktoberfest, and I still struggle saying that, because when I first came here and people said, oh yeah, we have an Oktoberfest, I was like,
And Oktoberfest.
what do you mean? It's not. What do you mean?
It's like a chain.
It's one thing. You can't have a. It's like, yeah, I also have a Josh at home.
Yeah.
Like, no, there's just one of these.
Yeah.
And like, I always thought they should rather say an Oktoberfest version, or an Oktoberfest, I don't even know, copy, I guess, or,
Yeah.
but
But no, I mean, that's the thing, is like, in the U.S. there are multiple Oktoberfests. I think Las Vegas has a big one. If I'm
a lot of places do. I think Chicago has one
Yeah.
too. I think more cities than we realize have an Oktoberfest, and Cincinnati claims to have the largest one in the United States. Cincinnati also sometimes claims to have the second largest in the world,
Yeah.
which I don't think is true.
I don't think so either. I know there's a huge one in Brazil too.
Yeah, and there's also a huge one somewhere in Asia. I don't remember the country right now. And there's a huge one in Canada, I believe in Toronto. There's one somewhere close to the American border, and it's really big one. I think that one might be the third biggest one after, I think, Brazil, because I think Brazil is the second largest one.
So Cincinnati has a lot of competition when it comes to the size of its Oktoberfest. But what was your impression, Feli, of our Oktoberfest? Because
weird.
The Oktoberfest is from Munich, right? And
yeah.
It's completely different.
I grew up with it. So, I mean, it's kind of like it's like a town festival. I mean, that's how it started out. And the thing is, in Germany, or in southern Germany, in Bavaria and also Baden-Württemberg, it's a traditional thing that we have different kind of beer festivals for different occasions. Like for May festivals are a thing, and there's spring festivals, and then in the summer there's a lot of festivals, different occasions, and then it usually goes up into the fall, which is kind of like Oktoberfest is one of the last ones taking place in Germany, and that's when the Volksfestsaison, so like the traditional festival season is over, and Oktoberfest just happens to be one of them. Technically, it's just one of those festivals. There's a lot of other very similar festivals,
even in the Munich area.
In neighboring cities like Rosenheim, and that's why it's so weird that people try to copy that specific festival, but then it's nothing like it.
Yeah.
So basically, how I would explain it to other Germans is that these cities here in the U.S. just take the name Oktoberfest because it's so famous in the world and use it to host a Germany-themed or Bavaria-themed street festival. In most cases, it's a street festival, right?
Yeah.
We even have several Oktoberfests here in Cincinnati. When we talk about Oktoberfest, we talk about the big one by the banks, which is like...
There's one in downtown Cincinnati, which we normally refer to.
A street festival, so like they kind of close down all the streets down there. They have a lot of booths and stuff like that. But then some of the German societies that we have here in Cincinnati also host their own Oktoberfest, which is usually, I think, different because it's hosted on their property. So it's not a street festival.
It's not a street festival. If anything, I hesitate to say it's more authentic.
Yeah.
Because it's still not it's still not particularly authentic, but because it's on its own property, you have a bigger drinking tent. Yeah. That's the thing about like the street festival, like the Oktoberfest in Cincinnati that people mostly refer to, is it's a street festival where you have booths that line the streets, and the Oktoberfest in Munich, you have these huge, I think it's hilarious that they call them tents because they're buildings. Yeah. They're just these drinking halls with so many tables, and then there's a band that plays music in the front. It's very, very different than what...
I mean, we have booths at Oktoberfest too, but first of all, it's its own designated space, and it's a huge space, but it's more like a state fair, and it also goes on for 16 days straight. It's this whole huge thing that takes place in Munich. It's not a street festival, which we do have street festivals in Germany. Yeah. And that's what I would compare the Cincinnati Oktoberfest to, and I would assume that some of the Oktoberfests in other cities in the U.S. are probably like that too. And then you like go from booth to booth, and you will find some real German breweries, like Paulaner will have a booth, and Warsteiner, and was there a Bavarian one there?
I don't think so.
I don't even know. Oh, I think they had Weinstephaner, which isn't...
Yeah, you're right.
Weinstephaner is funny because it's not even that popular in Germany. It's from close to Munich. It's from Freising. But it's, for some reason, very popular in the States. They seem to do some really good export. Yeah, some really good export and probably good marketing, too. And then you can get that beer there, so that is real. But you'll get it, you'll have to line up, and you'll get it in a plastic mug. And you'll keep walking with it.
Yeah, you get a plastic mug, and there's no fund on it. There's no deposit, which is really common at like street festivals in Germany.
Yeah, and then I mean you can buy your food at the booths, and there might be like a band playing somewhere on an open air stage. Yeah. And I think there's a couple like very small tents. It's more like they have a roof.
Yeah, it's an actual tent.
Yeah. How do you call those things?
I would call it a tent, but it's not like a tent that you sleep in. It's more like just a covering.
Okay, I didn't know if there was like a name for that.
There probably is. I just don't know it, or I've forgotten it. We call it
like pavilion.
I was gonna say pavilion, but I think that's the German because it's not a pavilion.
Anyway, so basically that Oktoberfest in Cincinnati is fun to me. if you know what you're getting into. It's
Yeah.
fun if you know that you are going to go to a Germany-themed street festival.
One thing that's really funny though is they import German bands. So there's a band I think from the Allgäu that comes over and plays like brass music, like typical Bavarian music at the Cincinnati Oktoberfest.
They might think like, where did we end up here? What is this?
But some of the other things that like are supposedly German, but they do at the Cincinnati Oktoberfest, the running of the Wiener dogs.
Oh yeah.
Where
So Dackelrennen.
Yeah.
And I don't know if everyone does this or if only some people do that, but they dress their Wiener dogs up as hot dogs.
Yeah.
So they basically put a bun, like hot dog bun costume around their dog.
Typical German,
Which
right?
is just, oh my God. Every German is probably shaking their heads right now. Like, no.
If you're watching on YouTube, we'll have to put a picture
Yeah.
of that in there. Another thing that they do is the chicken dance. That's the Cincinnati Oktoberfest's claim to fame, is that they have the largest chicken dance.
I think that's actually true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, they just have all these people gather this one day, I think the first day. This Oktoberfest only lasts for 1 weekend. So I think
Yeah.
on Friday is when it is that they gather everyone who wants to participate in the world's largest or, American's largest chicken dance. And a lot of people do dress up as chickens.
Or they wear chicken hats.
Exactly. They wear a chicken hat and then they dance the chicken dance, which in German is Ententanz. In German, it's actually called the duck dance. But no, this isn't even a German thing, really.
Fremdschämen to the max.
This has a very different origin. I think it was written or it was taken over. I've talked about this in my Oktoberfest video. I can't remember right now. But I think a music teacher kind of came up with it pretty recently. Like, it's not an old German tradition, And I think the melody originates in France. And the only occasion where Germans dance the chicken dance is when we're kids and we're at like a kids party and they want to, have the kids dance in an easy choreography that everyone can remember. And I used to do it on vacation when we went to like vacation resorts in, I don't know, Italy or Spain. And those vacation resorts where you have
the kids'
daycare.
activities.
Yeah, like daycare. And then like at night we had like a kids disco and we would dance it at the disco.
You dance the chicken dance at the
Yes.
disco.
And that's it though.
Yeah.
We do not dance that at Oktoberfest ever. So
man.
yeah. So I mean, all of these things kind of have an impact on how Americans like you, Josh, before you started learning German and learned about the German culture, view the German culture or the Bavarian culture. And some other important things for that, I think, are German language programs at schools, high schools.
The way I learned German.
Exactly, colleges. I mean, there are a lot of German language programs at high schools here in Cincinnati, and I would assume it's the same throughout the other German-heavy regions here. But I also know that there are a lot of cities and places in the U.S. where the high schools don't even offer German at all. But in those places where they do, the teachers really have a pretty big responsibility as to how they convey the German culture.
Yeah.
I know that you were lucky with it because
I had a native German as my teacher, but that's normally not the case.
Yeah.
One thing I think is really funny, and I think Germans will find this funny as well, like the way that you refer to your teacher in German classes in the U.S. is normally just Herr or Frau, is what they'll say.
so weird.
So like for the longest time, I called my teacher, like I would just be like, "Hey Frau, I have a question."
Wait, you did it with Frau König too?
Well, yeah, before I knew that was really like
Oh,
that was me saying, "Hey woman."
yeah.
That was back when I would say Frau, not Frau.
No, yeah. I mean, so the thing is, a lot of American teachers tell their students to call them that.
Yeah, they embrace it.
Yeah, and that's just weird because, like, especially here in Cincinnati, or I think it's mainly a Midwestern thing, but I've heard that it's also a thing in other places in the U.S. and also in other countries all over the world. Like, I've heard from people from South America that they do that there too in German class.
Okay.
And yeah, they just refer to their teacher, like even when they talk about them, like, oh yeah, I had a really great teacher in German class back in the day.
Yeah.
Frau was amazing, like as if that is her name. No.
You would never do that in German. It would be
No.
like Frau König, Frau, I don't know.
Right.
You say their last name. It's
Yeah,
like
so
Mr. or Mrs.
Basically, yeah, but so Frau means Miss or Mrs. or woman, one of the two. But the thing is, in German, you just can't use it by itself as you could in French when you approach someone as Madame or Monsieur or Sir in in English, or you could approach someone as Miss, I guess, in English, but that doesn't work in German.
No, you're right. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you're totally
I think that's
right.
why people think that works, but it doesn't. And so
so that's just a goofy thing about like German language classes in the US.
And then, I mean, a lot of them teach very strong American accents. And then
So lernen Sie, wie man Deutsch spricht.
Yours wasn't even that strong.
No.
You tried your hardest. And, you know, they do tell people about German culture, but in a lot of cases, from what I've heard, in a lot of cases, they really teach more stereotypical German culture, which isn't even always true.
Yeah.
So they might even teach their kids, like, hey, in Germany at the Oktoberfest, they dance the chicken dance.
Yeah, I know like people who do the chicken dance in German class.
Right. So
in the US.
They definitely have a pretty big influence on how people here in the US view the German culture, because that's what they grow up with.
Yeah, they're also kind of responsible for perpetuating those German stereotypes that aren't necessarily true.
Another small thing is that there's a thing called the German American Day, which like all these different German societies all over the US celebrate together, also usually in cooperation with the German embassy. And, you know, a lot of those festivals that take place for the German American Day are also heavily influenced by stereotypes. And it'll be people dressing up in either Tracht, so like lederhosen and dirndl, which in some cases aren't the most authentic, but in some cases they are authentic. Or we've even, I think, seen people dress up in like old-fashioned German like uniforms from like back in the day. Do you remember at Findlay Market that one time, like people were wearing like from like the German Empire?
Oh, really?
They were wearing some kind of
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing that, but I do. It's always funny, like when we would go to Oktoberfest or like other festivals in our Tracht, and then you look at what other people were wearing, you're like, it's just funny. It's not like looking down on them. It's just like,
I mean, a lot of them basically wear a Halloween or carnival
it's
costume.
more like a costume as opposed to...
Yeah, which in a lot of cases isn't... It's like supposed to be the German girl, quote unquote, but it'll have this really, really big cleavage, which the German dresses do have that too, but it's like... Maybe you know what I mean. It's kind of like the satin.
It's even more exaggerated.
This like satin material. Anyway, so there are funny things that you'll see at those celebrations. Sometimes they do authentic things, but not always. So all of that definitely has a pretty big influence.
And I think the last thing that we were going to mention for this episode is like a Christmas market, right? So Christmas markets are a huge thing in Germany, and unfortunately, I haven't really gotten to experience them in their full glory.
Right.
Because I've always been in the US for the Christmas time. So I've experienced like the end of it once, and then just the beginning of a couple of the Christmas markets, but nothing like full-fledged. But I've seen pictures and I've seen videos, and Glühwein is great. So
Mulled wine,
so mulled wine is great, and I can imagine like how awesome that would really be to experience. And that's one thing that I like that we have here in Cincinnati. And in the last few years, it started to die down some. It's a little difficult, but it'll be interesting to see if it can push through. But yeah, I know in Chicago, they have a huge Christmas market.
Yeah.
Have you been there?
No. I'm just saying yes. No. No, I've heard about that, and like I know that people talk about that one being like the best in the US. I haven't visited it.
Neither have I.
Maybe I will in the future if it's ever possible to do stuff again socially.
Probably not.
That would be awesome to go there. But basically, a Christmas market in Germany is it can look very, very different depending on where you go. In Munich, we have like at least 20 usually, 20 or 30 even. I don't want to say anything wrong, but we have a lot. It's kind of like every neighborhood has their own, because it's kind of like a place to gather, and they will just set up different booths with selling, you know, mulled wine, Glühwein. They will sell food, like a lot of sausages and stuff like that, a lot of, you know, pancake like kind of dishes like Kaiserschmarrn or crepes or something like that. Roasted almonds, and then sometimes they will have booths where they sell ornaments or other
like crafts or homemade, not homemade, but like artisanal gifts that you can buy.
Yeah, and then like in Cincinnati, they do have a couple of those, which, you know, they try and make it authentic, and that's actually really nice to just, you know, go there, be outside, drink a hot wine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky to do it in the U.S. because you probably have to get a lot more permits to be able to do it.
To drink alcohol in
with the
public is what you're
alcohol.
trying to say,
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say, and the Glühwein, I feel like adds to, not that you have to drink to enjoy a Christmas market, but it definitely adds to the atmosphere and the
For
charm.
sure. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, generally, I think those were the main things that came to mind when we thought about what is the German culture in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, let's say like for the Christkindl markets, I don't even know, Christmas markets.
Yeah.
I think that's how it is with a lot of these things. Like they try and make it look authentic in some cases, like the Fountain Square one.
Yeah.
Usually I think that looked kind of authentic,
Small, but authentic.
but it's still not authentic because a lot of the stuff is just different and people act very differently. So that's the same with these like Stammtisch or Oktoberfest celebrations. Even if people really try and make it authentic, the way that people behave is just going to be different.
At the end of the day, you're not in Germany.
Yeah, the circumstances are just different. So it's just obviously never the same. But to me, I have to say though, even though it's not 100% authentic, I do enjoy going to a Stammtisch. I do enjoy eating a soft pretzel that's at least trying to be as Bavarian as possible. I do enjoy going to a Christkindlmarkt if I'm not home for Christmas, you know? Like, it's better than nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I totally would relate to that. And for me, the times when I'd be back in the U.S. after spending time in Germany, it was kind of what would help me bridge my time until I got to go back.
Yeah, and
so
also for us, it was always an occasion to meet up with our German-speaking friends, and then, you know, we would create our own little Germany.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, the cool thing is it pulls a lot of the German expats into the community as well, so then you get to know the other Germans throughout the city.
Right.
So it's definitely something that's cool. Even though it's not the same, it's something that's really cool and that I learned to value during my time here.
Yeah. Well, I think we will probably have to talk about American culture in Germany at some point then.
Yeah, no, for sure. The thing is, American culture is obviously present in Germany, but in a completely different way as opposed to like these enclave communities that there were in the U.S., people coming from the motherland and trying to maintain traditions. Right.
We don't have a lot of like old American traditions, but at the same time, there aren't as many old American traditions because it's a pretty new country. But I mean, we did have American occupation in parts of Germany for a while there. And a lot of Germans are kind of, I don't want to say obsessed, but really enjoy American culture in a way. And I do know that there are a lot of restaurants that have opened up in the past, I want to say like 5 to 10 years, like American diners, burger places.
I was just gonna say burgers, and we should save some of these topics for the episode that we do. But Germans are obsessed with hamburgers, like cheeseburgers, making the perfect burger.
Yeah. So we will, and steakhouses and stuff like that too. So we will talk about that in the future at some point. But that was it for today, I think.
Yeah.
Shorter episode, which is honestly nice for us. It's a change. And hopefully it's nice for you guys to listen to a shorter episode too, which our short episodes are still pretty long.
Yeah, it's not a half-hour episode, but still not our typical hour and a half. So we really hope that you guys enjoyed hearing from us and seeing us together again in person if you're watching on YouTube. But yeah, we hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. We hope that you all are doing well and staying safe during all of this craziness. Getting vaccinated if you have the opportunity. I'm super lucky that I'm going to get my vaccine before I head back to Germany, and I'm getting the Johnson & Johnson, so one and done.
Yeah, one dose. I just got the first Pfizer one a couple days ago, and I'm going to get the next one in 2.5 weeks, so I'm really excited about that. Yeah. There was no chance that any of us would get it in Germany anytime soon. Like, even older people and high-risk people still have to wait there, which is sad. We talked about it last time. But anyway,
So,
thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. If you want to reach out to us and support us, there are a couple different ways that you can do that. We have an email, like you guys know, that's set up. It's understandingtrainstation@gmail.com.
You can follow us on Instagram at understandingtrainstation.
Another way that you guys can reach out / support us if you want to support us monetarily with our project that we're doing here, we have a Patreon set up. It's patreon.com/understandingtrainstation.
Correct. Monetarily, that's a very smart word.
Monetarily. What did I say?
Like that.
Did I say monetarily support us?
Yeah, support us monetarily. Yeah. I was like, wow, that sounds very sophisticated. And then the other way that you can support us monetarily is on Buy Me a Coffee. It's buymeacoffee.com/UTS podcast.
I feel like people are going to say that monetarily isn't a word now. I think it is.
I think it is. Let's just make it a word if it's not. But I think it's just it's a big word.
Yes,
it's a big word.
Well, that's it for this week, guys.
Yeah, we're gonna be back next Thursday. Stay safe and healthy one more time.
Yep.
And tschüss.
Servus.